Alright, how's it going everyone? Gamma Fighter here, coming at you with another Sylvaneth video. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the brand new battle plans for the 2025 to 2026 General's Handbook. So for those of you who are new, this is a Sylvaneth channel, but we're going to be looking at the battle plans, which is applicable for everyone. I'm just going to be mentioning some stuff specific to Sylvaneth as far as our strategies and things like that, and the way that I approach the analysis of it. But you should be able to learn stuff from that as well. Other thing is that I'm not a pro player or anything like that. I'm a casual player. I like painting and things like that, but I like thinking about Sylvaneth. I like talking about Sylvaneth. So if you're okay with this maybe not being the most competitive meta type of advice and just kind of my first impressions as sort of a lay person, then feel free to stick around. So first off, we got to get into a bunch of changes. There's a ton to cover right now, so I'm going to try and go as quickly as I can. So there's some big changes to obscuring. And one thing is that the battle plans, the recommended terrain layout is going to have a lot of obscuring on it. So this is going to have a really big impact. So while every model that's not a monster and doesn't have flying is within 1 inch of the terrain feature, then this applies to the unit. The unit is only visible to enemies that are within its combat range, and the range characteristic of the unit's ranged weapons is halved. So first of all, it's not wholly within anymore. It's as long as all the models are within 1 inch, which gives you a little more wiggle room there. And then being completely invisible is a pretty big change here, and it's going to make shooting in particular a lot worse because if people are going to be in this obscuring terrain, then you're not going to be able to shoot at them. And there's some stuff like some spells and things like that that have requirement that the the target be visible. So those won't work on us anymore. Or sorry, those won't work when you're in obscuring anymore because they won't be visible. Then the range characteristic being halved is a pretty big deal because that will take our kurnoth hunters with great bows down from 18 inches down to 9 inches, which is much worse. So this could be pretty bad for shooting. Now, you could get around that by having one model that's not within 1 inch, and then you can always have, if they cast a spell on that your unit of kurnoth hunters or something, and they deal damage, you could remove that model, and then you'd be in obscuring now, and you wouldn't be visible for any further spells or shooting or anything like that. So there's a way to get around it, but it's a big difference. It's pretty bad. Yeah, and in the current rules, the awakened wildwoods for Sylvaneth are considered obscuring. So, but wait a second. I think it says that it's obscuring for everyone except for Sylvaneth. If that's the case, then it won't matter for our awakened wildwoods. But if they do count as obscuring for awakened wildwoods, then that would lower our range when shooting out of them. So I may have to check on that, or we might have to wait until they release these rules officially. They may have an FAQ that addresses some of these questions. So something to think about when we're going forward. Then there were some changes to, oh yeah, and this is the other reason. On the battle plans, there's a lot of terrain that's already obscuring, but they also added that the places of power have this ability that on a 3-up, you can turn an objective or a terrain feature into obscuring, even if it doesn't already have it. So all the objectives could be obscuring. We could have basically the whole table covered in obscuring, which is a really big deal. The other thing is there's no bonus to casting from the places of power anymore. You can still unbind or banish as if you were a wizard or priest, even if you didn't already have it, and that's not on a dice roll anymore. So that's a good bonus for things that aren't wizards or priests. And then the final ability that they gave it, although it's the first one listed, is you roll a die on a 1, then you deal 1 mortal damage to every place of power. Within 6 inches of every place of power on the map. On a 2, nothing happens, and then on a 3-up, you heal 2 for all units that are within 6 inches of that one place of power. So it's kind of a weird ability. It's going to have niche applications, so I'm not sure how I feel about it. I'm not thrilled about it. And yeah, making everything obscuring is kind of crazy too. Next, there are some changes. Covering fire is now only in your shooting phase, not during your opponent's shooting phase. Seems like a weird change and sort of against the spirit of the ability to begin with. So we'll have to see if they do like FAQ this, but it's listed in multiple places, as at least 2 places, as being just for your shooting phase. So I'm really not sure. It seems intentional, but I have seen some like grammatical mistakes and stuff on here, so it could be a mistake. All out attack also got changed. It still adds +1 to your hit rolls, but now you get -1 to your save rolls for the rest of the turn on that unit. So for the rest of the turn, meaning if you do it in the shooting phase, it applies for the rest of the turn. If you use it in the combat phase, it applies for the rest of the turn as well. So that's pretty crazy. Pretty big downside. And then all out defense only works against one enemy unit. So you have to pick and choose which enemy unit you're going to be using all out defense against. So that's pretty limited as well. Now, these were the two basically most powerful abilities, or most commonly used for sure, and maybe most impactful is a better way to say it. You know, if you get a counter charge off, then that can be the most impactful type of a thing. But as far as like the application, it's pretty universally useful to be able to use all out attack, shooting phase, combat phase. The same thing using all out defense in the shooting phase, the combat phase as well. So that's probably why they were trying to nerf it. Nothing specifically for Sylvaneth, but there we go. And then for the generic manifestations, a lot of them were hitting on like 2s and 3s, and they changed the result to 4s. So that's a pretty big nerf to them, because I don't think they adjusted the attack number of attacks or the damage or the render or anything to compensate for that. So those War Scrolls are nerfed pretty badly. Yeah. And speaking of which, they did change the way that the manifestations are treated. So there's I don't really want to get into it, because I wasn't planning on, and it'll just make the video longer if I keep trying to find it. Okay, but if you download a copy of this on this page, or if you want to just pause it here, it does lay out the changes to the manifestations. It's a little outside the scope for us right now, but we're going to go ahead and take a look at the battle plans now. And oh, I did forget one other thing. We're going to be looking at terrain there's going to be terrain on the maps that they have the recommended terrain layout. And so it's going to be kind of a big deal to understand what those look like. So they're going to have, they're going to have these different ones. So obstacles, those provide cover and unstable. So unstable means any part of it that's higher than an inch tall, you can't end your movement there. And then cover means that you get -1 to be hit when you're behind it. Obscuring terrain is going to be cover, obscuring, and unstable. Area terrain, something like a hill, is going to be cover and obscuring. They have the obstacles and the area terrain combined, so it's kind of going to be up to whoever sets up the board whether they want to put it as a little hill or as an obstacle. And then places of power are also cover, places of power, unstable, and obscuring. And so it's interesting because everything except the obstacles already has obscuring, and we are going to see a lot of obscuring terrain. So there's going to be a lot of obscuring. That obscuring rule is going to be, it's not going to be obscure, it's going to be very relevant. So ironically. So then the other thing for these battle plans, I'm going to assume that when it has an obstacle, I'm going to assume that that means that they intend for the terrain piece that they use to be mostly blocking. So mostly that you can't end your movement on there, and trying to manipulate the way that you can move. Whereas with the obscuring terrain, they're kind of intending for you to move into it to gain that obscuring ability. And the place of power, sort of somewhere in between that. They're not necessarily intending for you to be able to easily get into it for obscuring. It's mostly going to be there as a little obstacle, a smaller obstacle that also acts as a place of power. Otherwise, if we don't make those assumptions, all these terrain pieces are essentially identical, except that the place of power can be used as a place of power. So it's kind of weird that, you know, when I first was looking at these, I was just assuming that these were impassable, like walls or ruins, like they depict in the picture. But these could be hills or anything like that. I'm going to assume that these are meant to more obstruct your movement ability, at least your ability to end your movement there, as compared to the obscuring terrain and the place of power. So other things, when we're looking at these, we're going to be talking about general strategy that pops out to me, and I'm going to be looking at it from a couple different perspectives. Number one is going to be the alarielle belthanos castle that we had so popular in the previous General's Handbook. I think that it's worth looking at to see if that's still going to be a powerful combination to try and use. Next, I'm thinking of the Monster Mash list, using a bunch of treelords, Spirit of Durthu, treelord ancient, those types of things, as well as Lady Vines or Draika, possibly alarielle or belthanos as well. And though these are, except for alarielle and belthanos, these are generally not quick units. With the new Scourge of Gyran rules, we did get a battle formation that lets us teleport a hero, as many hero units as we want every turn. So that could offset some of the mobility issues that they have of moving like 5 inches or so. But being able to teleport basically your whole army, if you're running a Monster Mash list, could kind of offset some of those downsides. And we'll look at that actually on this very battle plan as well. And then finally, I'm going to be thinking about cavalry, a more cavalry heavy list. I know a lot of people are not convinced that cavalry is going to be any good, but the way people are talking about it is maybe mobility is going to be rewarded in this General's Handbook after looking at the battle plans. So I'm going to kind of explore that idea from a Sylvaneth perspective and see what we think about that. Does it kind of hold up? Can we see cavalry having some use here where mobility is going to be prized more than raw power? It seems like with the previous General's Handbook, they gave us kind of like a sampler platter, greatest hits battle plans, and the battle tactics were pretty straightforward, that kind of a thing. And so it was mostly just about the raw power, smashing our armies into each other and seeing what happens. It seems like they're trying to lean us with these battle plans, the battle tactics, and the new rules and everything. They're trying to lean us into more techie, more nuanced tactical kind of gameplay. So we'll see if that holds up as far as looking at these battle plans. So that's the question of what's going to be the better way to play. So with all that out of the way, we can get into it. So this we're going to take a look at the points here. In battle rounds 1, 3, and 5, each of the gnarl root or green objectives is going to be worth 5 points. That's another one of the changes. The objectives are now named and color-coded, and they have a specific meaning, as we can see right here. And the cool thing is, it's Sylvaneth themed because we're in Gyran, and that's our favorite mortal realm for the Sylvaneth is Gyran, the realm of life. So we're getting some pretty cool homages to us, and I think, honestly, it does sort of flavorfully, there are some things that Sylvaneth can do that sort of help us here in these places, which is kind of flavorful as well. So yeah, pretty cool. So then on the even turns, the Oakenbrow or red objectives are turned on, and they're worth 5 victory points each. So my first thought on this is that these are really spread out, and you might think that they want you to alternate between holding the green objectives and holding the red objectives, because that's how the scoring goes. It alternates, but that's crazy. Pardon my French. That's just a little bonkers. I don't think it's gonna be easy, depending on your opponent, of course. It's not gonna be easy to hold the Oakenbrow objective in your opponent's territory, and it's gonna be pretty easy to hold the Oakenbrow objective in your territory. So that to me says that actually maybe, and this space is just too big to control this whole space, so maybe it's best to split into 2 main groups, main armies, and try to hold just the gnarl root. Because if you can hold just the gnarl root and deny your opponent from taking it at all, then you're going to be winning on primaries by a considerable margin. So that seems like the best way to approach it. Now, as an army that has teleports readily available, you can look for those opportunities to teleport in some tree revenants. If you're playing cavalry, to sneak something around the back, maybe belthanos sneaking around the back or something like that, and you can capture that Oakenbrow objective for relatively low cost, then I think that's worth it. Don't throw away belthanos in round 1 to try and get Oakenbrow in round 2 or anything like that. But yeah, we should always look for those opportunities to be able to be sneaky and tricksy and take that. But for the most part, I think the dominant strategy for this map is just going to be holding these 2 and not give them up. And as I was saying, one of the things we have as Sylvaneth, even if you're doing a Monster Mash list, is you could drop an Awakened Wildwoods in both of the corners. And if you see that maybe your north gnarl route is getting beaten back by the opponent, maybe you can teleport some units from the south one up to the north to help reinforce it. And yeah, it's not going to be instant. You know, you've got a 9-inch charge when you teleport in, but it could be useful in repositioning it. It might take a turn or two to be able to do that. You know, you might not actually get repositioned until the second turn, but compared to walking all the way across the board, it is an advantage that we have in being able to do that. So that's pretty cool. Next, we're going to be looking at the underdog rules here. And so on 2 and 4, let's start with the odd ones. Let's start during rounds 3 and 5. If you're the underdog, you get +1 to wound when you're contesting the gnarl root objective. That's when the gnarl root is turned on, so getting +1 to wound is pretty good. It's just a nice bonus to be able to deal more damage. The problem for us is, you know, regardless of which list you're running, you know, you're wounding on 2s a lot, and so getting +1 to wound doesn't do anything unless your opponent, you know, has a penalty to you for your wound rolls. So it's kind of worthless for us. The cavalry list would benefit from this, but yeah, it would just be kind of a small benefit, pretty straightforward. The more complicated one is on the even turns. This is when the Oakenbrows are turned on. You can choose to either heal for D3 to for your friendly units that are contesting Oakenbrow objectives, so either one of them. This is a weird ability because it presumes that you're already on the Oakenbrow objective at the start of the battle round. So it could be that maybe you did make a valiant push for the Oakenbrow objective, and either you, you just took some damage doing that. You can heal. You can choose to heal. The problem is that this is happening on the turn when Oakenbrow turns on, which means the previous turn you probably weren't fighting over the Oakenbrow objectives that weren't worth any points. I could see it coming up, but it's not. It doesn't seem intuitively like super relevant. The other ability is that when you're contesting gnarl root, you either get a ward save of a 6 if you don't have a ward save, or you add 1 to your ward rolls for that unit. This is a really powerful defensive buff. Getting a ward out of nowhere is nice, always welcome, but taking your ward from 6 up to 5 up is really big, and from a 5 up to a 4 up is absolutely massive. So this could be a really good buff defensively, help you to be able to hold the line and that type of thing. And it's on the gnarl root objective, which kind of supports my theory that the best way to play this, or the most dominant strategy, is going to be to go for those gnarl root objectives. It seems like maybe they're sort of not so subtly telling us that we should be mostly fighting over the gnarl roots, and if the opportunity comes up, you can take your opponent's Oakenbrow, but mostly to focus on the gnarl roots. So that's my thoughts for this battle plan. Yeah, and definitely kind of summarizing as well, I feel like this does favor a more mobile battle plan generally, or at least something that is capable of splitting into 2 armies. So the alarielle belthanos list is, you know, a castle. We'd consider it a castle, but it's possible you could split up a little bit, although one side is going to be quite a bit weaker. So yeah, not sure. Okay, battle plan number 2. I'm going to touch briefly here on the objective points. So this is the most common scoring that we have in this General's Handbook. 5 points for holding 5 points for holding 1 objective, 3 points for 2 or more, and 2 points for holding more than your opponent. There's an odd number of objectives. You've got 2 on your side, 2 on the opponent's side, and then 1 in the very middle. So it really seems like you are mostly going to be fighting over this middle objective and should have a pretty easy time holding your back objectives. And I forgot to say on this one, for the terrain layout, sorry, going back to Battle Plan 1, just one more note, really apologize. It does seem like, you know, the terrain doesn't seem super impactful. Maybe you need something quite quick because these objectives are pretty far away. So to be able to go from your deployment zone onto that objective, maybe you do need to be quite quick. Although, now that I'm thinking about it, you have to be 9 inches away from the opponent's deployment. So down here, you're pretty close to the objective right there. So maybe it's not such a big deal. But then I think the idea is to try and just make it a little bit harder to go from east to west type of a thing. Yeah, otherwise it is fairly open, which is good for castles, but it's just such a big space to control. So, all right, sorry about that. Going back to Battle Plan 2. For this one, yeah, so it looks like it does want us to fight over the center objective. There's some obstacles here in the middle right around those, but it is kind of a wide area, so it doesn't strike me as much of a choke point right here. Going from the center to the west side. So if you are the defender and you're on the west side going for their Oakenbrow, it does seem like it would be a bit tough, even if we consider the obscuring is probably a little bit easier to move through. It is a little bit blocked by this obstacle, but not too much here. And just looking at the layout, it is quite far from the center objective to the flank objectives, to your Oakenbrow and Gnarlroot or theirs. So while I said this may favor a castle army, because you generally want to fight over the center, it seems like the mobile armies are going to have some counterplay here by being able to take these objectives, and it's going to be hard for castle armies to respond because they can't cover both of them, and a faster army may be able to just get to the other side quicker and maybe give up. Hey, you can take that center objective. I'm going to take the other 4, and what are you going to do about it? It's going to take you forever to get your army all the way across the board. That seems like kind of how it's going to go, unless they can, without committing too many of their forces, be able to hold these back objectives. Now, all that being said, it all kind of goes away when we look at the underdog. So that's the analysis without looking at the twist, the underdog. But yeah, with the underdog has to pick 2 objectives to be the target, and then any units, friendly and enemy, that are within 6 inches of that objective have to be removed from the battlefield by the commander. They're considered vanished, and then you have to set up, starting with the underdog, you begin setting up units on those 2 objectives, the same 2 objectives that were selected. So that is pretty bonkers. You have to be outside of 3 inches from enemy units, so it is possible to set up for both players to set up on the same objective. But you could deploy in such a way as to prevent your opponent from deploying on that objective. You could also try and bait. Yeah, I feel like there's going to be a lot of gotchas where people don't really understand how the opponent is deploying, and so your opponent could kind of trap you and then end up where you've got lost units and you can't deploy anymore, stuff like that. If you have lost units, then during your movement phase you can deploy them once again 9 inches from all enemies, but wholly within 7 inches of the battlefield. But even then, it's kind of a tough situation trying to get things back into the battle. If you're going second, then your units are gone during your opponent's turn, type of thing. Could be pretty bad. And there's a lot of shenanigans you can do with this. This is, if we're fighting over this center objective, the underdog could just have you teleport back all the way to your Gnarlroot objective, or back to your Oakenbrow objective, and put their units on the Heartwood objective in the middle here. And if they're a quicker army, then they can grab the Gnarlroot objectives as well as their own Oakenbrow. And if you're a slow-moving castle, it's going to take you forever to get back into that fight and start taking objectives again. So it does seem like mobility is going to be a key issue for this unit, or for this battle plan. And I think it will come down to being able to adapt to the situation and jump around and get back into the fight, all these types of things. And a really good player, there's going to be a lot of room for skill expression, is what I'm going towards. So ultimately, I think this is a more mobile, positive map. Moving on to battle plan number 3, Roiling Roots. We got 5 points for 1, 3 points for holding a pair of objectives, and 2 points for more than your opponent. So pairs refers to when they have the same coloring or the same symbol. The Oakenbrow, a pair refers to both Oakenbrow or to both Gnarlroot. You can't have a pair being like a Heartwood and an Oakenbrow or something like that. And this one, just looking at the layout here, there is a bit of obstacles here that are kind of making it a little bit more difficult to move around. But this map is pretty spread out. These aren't, I wouldn't exactly characterize these as choke points, but they do just kind of manipulate the way that you have to move to go east to west across the map, and even going north to south as well. So keep that in mind. Now, when we're looking at the paired objectives, it does seem like it's going to be harder to grab the Oakenbrow objective off your opponent because it's so close to their deployment, deployment zone, whereas something like a castle army could, in theory, take this center and move and push their way up onto this gnarl root and be able to control this space between the two gnarl root objectives. Seems like that would be easier to do. Whereas maybe a more mobile army might be able to capture the Oakenbrow objective and grab their own as well, that type of a thing. So we'll have to see how people end up playing out on this map. Maybe people do end up just smashing into each other in the middle, but it seems like the gnarl root, controlling the gnarl roots is going to be a stronger way to go. But again, with a little bit of counterplay from these more mobile units to be able to adapt. So interesting. Now, the underdog ability is that you can pick a pair of objectives. So once again, it only can apply to the gnarl root or the Oakenbrow. Pick a pair of objectives, and then all units, friendly and enemy, have strike last while they're contesting that objective. So once again, I feel like this could be a pretty strong skill expression map, because you could it's sort of like a double situation where you could end up being outside of the objective, so you're not contesting it, and you're fighting something that is on the objective, and so they have strike last, and that gives you a advantage, sort of like a double, where you get to fight before they get a chance, kind of idea. It's not exactly analogous, but I hope you get the idea. And you would be sacrificing getting the points for that turn for a chance to wipe out your opponent, or maybe do some serious damage to them where they are incredibly hampered in their ability to score. The other thing is that the way it works is if you have as you move to each phase, it's hard because there's like so many different scenarios and different combinations of how you can fight. But if you are the last one that activated a combat during the regular fighting phase, the regular combat phase, when you move into the strike last phase, if it's your turn, you still get to go first in the strike last phase. They're sort of considered different combat phases, and then the rules apply where the active player goes first. That's how it is in Strike First, and that's part of why Fight First is so good, is because let's say you are the only one with a Fight First ability, you get to fight first with that unit, but then it goes into the regular combat phase, and then you get to go first again because it's your turn. So my understanding of this, I didn't double check the rules on this. My understanding is that it's the same thing with fights last. If you went last in the regular combat phase and then you go into the strike last phase, you get to go first too because you're the active player. So there's that. The other thing is, I haven't come across this, and so I haven't, had a judge call on it or whatever, but I'm pretty sure the pile-in move happens when you are activating for combat. So if you're activating for combat and you do a pile-in move, you get on the objective, you don't suddenly get strike last and then end up not getting to fight until later. You've already started your activation, so it wouldn't like pause your activation until the strike last phase. So what I'm saying is, my understanding of the rules, and we can double check this, is that if you are outside of an objective, you fight during the normal combat phase and you pile in onto an objective, you can contest that objective now, but you can still activate during the regular fights phase instead of strike last. So again, there's going to be a lot of room for skill expression as far as being able to block the objectives effectively to prevent opponents from doing that, or to hold in such a way where they have to come onto the objective, they have to be strike last in order to engage you. And vice versa, from the attacker's perspective, being able to position correctly to maximize your damage but still take advantage of that strike last effect. I feel like there's going to be a lot of skill expression with this one. Let me see. Yeah, that's the other thing. It makes controlling both of these gnarl root objectives quite a bit more risky, because they target a pair of objectives. So you could have your whole army right here and they could give your whole army strikes last if they're the underdog. So once again, as I said at the beginning, like, it seems like this could favor castles because it's a fairly easy space to control. It feels like the underdog rule kind of flips that on its head and actually makes it a little bit detrimental to try and control that space that way. So I do feel like this could be a battle plan where castles aren't super effective. Yeah, just generally speaking, yeah. Okay, moving on to number 4. Okay, this is 5 points if you held one objective, 3 points if you hold 2 or more, and then 2 points if you control more than your opponent. The interesting thing on this one is that there is an even number of objectives. So the hold more than your opponent is going to be a little bit more difficult to do. The other thing is that we've got these places of power across the middle, so we're going to be propagating that obscuring terrain probably onto the objectives. And we're assuming that the places of power are not super obstructive. They block a little bit of movement, but not a ton, which would mean that this, if that's true, then this is generally going to be a fairly open center. So that to me says that, you know, maybe a slower army may be okay with this battle plan. These objectives are pretty well spread out, but I don't think that's too much of a problem for them. So it's going to be pretty easy to hold 1 and to hold 2. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to control more than your opponent. So that's the consideration for this battle plan. Yeah, and so this battle plan may reward being able to move quickly to capitalize and getting your opponent to commit to an aggressive push to be able to get those extra 2 victory points each turn and take one of your objectives. But then if you can respond by taking 2 of their objectives with faster units, it could be a losing battle, and it could be that the best strategy for a castle army is to try and turtle up and protect all of their objectives and just tie on the victory points for the primaries, rather than making a mistake or overextending and getting punished by you taking, you know, 2 of their objectives and then you have 4 and they control maybe these 2 gnarl root objectives, for an example. So mobility could probably be encouraged on this one as well. But again, I'm not a super expert. All right, so now for the Oakenbrow, or for the underdog rule, you have the option to use unpredictable evolution, and then the objectives, you pick a pair of objectives, and then they're no longer controlled by either player. So once again, it's just the Oakenbrow or just the gnarl root. And the interesting thing about that is it does kind of contradict what I was saying about the castles trying to control the center, trying to take the gnarl root objectives. If they do that, then not only can you maybe go around and you know, maybe harass their weaker defenses at their other objectives on the flanks, but also you could just turn the gnarl root off, and then you are holding 4 objectives and they're holding none, or you're holding 2 or 3 and they're holding 0 or 1. You know, so it would be hard for slower moving armies to adapt in that situation. Again, you know, maybe we are looking at where you're splitting your forces into basically 2 different armies and trying to respond to the aggression of your opponent and shore up with reinforcements where they're needed. Moving on to battle plan number 5. Scoring is 5 for holding 1, 3 for holding an objective pair, and 2 for holding more than your opponent. So once again, we're looking at either the gnarl root, which is where 1 is going to be way deep in your opponent's territory, or these Oakenbrow, which are going to be on the edges here. And there is an odd number of objectives here, so the Heartwood could be pretty important here as well. But if you do want to, holding pairs is going to be more valuable than holding more objectives than your opponent. So you may be happy to, yeah, well, I guess, I don't know. I guess I was going to say, you know, it probably makes more sense to fight over the Oakenbrow, because even if they have the Heartwood and you have both Oakenbrow and the gnarl root, then you still got more objectives than they do. So it seems like going for the Oakenbrow is going to be the more dominant strategy. Maybe a castle could push straight through the Heartwood into your gnarl route, and then they would control the pairs of the gnarl route. But that's a lot of space. Well, maybe not a ton of space. That would leave their gnarl route, their own home gnarl route objective, more vulnerable, perhaps. I'm not sure. We'll have to see if castle armies can adapt to this, or if people are going to go with this strategy of maybe splitting into two main armies, and maybe that means a dual castle, one on each flank here, or something like that. Or maybe we shift to more mobile units. Interesting opportunities here for list building. Of course, even if you're not focused on the gnarl route objective on your opponent's side, if they do leave it open for your tree revenants to do something and teleport on there, then it may be valuable to go ahead and do that. Look for those opportunities if it's not going to cost you too much. So I do think this is going to be strong for mobility armies. For the underdog, you pick a pair, you get the choice, and then you can pick a pair of objectives, and you get +1 to rend for all of your units' melee weapons when they're contesting those objectives. So pretty much just no downside, just more damage, more rend to get through stuff. Useless on Night Hunt, but that's about it, Pretty much, there's just no downside, so it's pretty straightforward as far as that goes. Moving on, number 6 for this first table, we're looking at linked ley lines. So for this, a ley line is linked when it's a line of objectives. So, and it's only from short edge to short edge or long edge to long edge. So for example, this oaken brow and this gnarl route go from the long edge to the short edge, so that doesn't count as a ley line. It's basically these solid lines that are on here. In this case, that Heartwood objective is going to be very important. So you get 3 points for holding 1, which is the lowest amount of points that we've seen for just holding 1. You get 3 points for holding 2 or more. You get 2 points for holding pairs. And you hold 2 more points if you hold the ley line. And so once again, the holding the Heartwood is going to be really huge here because it gives you the opportunity to activate a ley line. It also denies your opponent from activating a ley line. So this is, so that can be a pretty good. So even if you don't activate the ley line, you're at least, or even if you're not holding objectives or activating the ley line, you're at least denying your opponent from linking the ley line and getting too far ahead, although they may get an advantage by holding pairs of objectives if you're not. So so this one is pretty open, pretty open space here. Even if we do consider these to be more blocking like obstacles, even without considering them sort of open terrains features, the objectives are kind of the closest together that we've seen, and the area is pretty open as well. So this is the first one where I really feel quite confident that castles are going to be able to dominate and be able to just, it doesn't seem too crazy for a castle to control at least most of this space and keep maybe a less equipped army out of that area and unable to take those objectives back. It's a little bit large, but not impossible, I think. Let's see. I said, so your own oaken brow is going to be easy to go for. And if you also control one of the gnarl routes, then you are stopping your opponent from getting the ley line, and you're stopping them from getting the pairs of objectives. So if you're if you're not a castle army, I guess is what I'm saying, or if you're outmatched, outgunned, you could try to take one objective and then control 2 or more objectives by holding on to a gnarl root and an oaken brow, whichever side your opponent is weaker on. And you can deny them these extra points, and you can basically just keep it tied up on the primaries and try to get ahead using battle tactics. This one might be a little bit of a lower scoring map to begin with because it is a little bit more difficult to hold in this way. I was saying earlier, castles can do it, so if anyone's going to be able to do it, it's probably castle armies to be able to grab 3 objectives here to be able to get full points. But generally, I think it's going to be a bit harder, and we may see a little bit lower of score on this battle plan, and it may come down to tactics just generally. And the underdog one is a little bit less relevant, I think. Maybe one of the more weak ones. I think as Sylvaneth, we don't totally lean on our manifestations a ton, but when you're the underdog, your friendly manifestations get strike first, and your friendly units get anti-manifestation +1 rend when you're contesting an objective that is both controlled by you and on a linked ley line. So if you're the underdog, it probably means you don't control a ley line, or if you do control the ley line, now maybe you're winning. You're going to win anyways. So this one's a little bit bad, but your manifestations getting strike first could be pretty strong. Although, like I said, we're not a super manifestation heavy, reliant army, but manifestations are pretty good. So something to consider there. Okay, moving on. We're halfway there. We're on battle plan number 2-1, and this one can be described as diabolical. I think that is probably the best word to describe it. Let's say I don't want to play this map. I want to watch people play it all day long, but I don't want to play on it myself. Okay, so the deployment zone, if you could see, it's halfway. It's half the board. Half of the board is no man's land, and it's this tiny area for deployment. It's diabolical is what it is. For the first battle round, there's no scoring objectives. You can still score battle tactics, of course. But then after that, for the remaining 4 rounds, it's 5 points for holding Oakenbrow, 3 for Gnarl Root, and 2 for Heartwood. And at the end of the game, whoever's controlling Heartwood gets an additional 10 victory points. So that's why you don't score in the first battle round. It's sort of an extra battle round worth of scoring, but it can only go to 1 player. So I think we will see most of the battles, or most of the wins on this map coming down to capturing that Heartwood objective at the very end, and getting it at the end of the battle for those 10 extra points. 10 points is a lot of points. It also denies your opponent 10 points. So it's basically a 20-point swing in a sense. So pretty bonkers, pretty diabolical. You're right in each other's grill. It's going to be very easy for aggressive and castle heavy armies to take this Oakenbrow objective and probably be able to push into the Gnarl Root. So it does seem like it's going to favor a castle-y kind of an army here. I don't see any obvious tricks or anything like this. This space is fairly open. It's a bit of a choke point with these places of power, but it's not super tight or anything like that. The perspective is a little weird. It's hard to tell because on the picture it looks so small. Maybe on the game board it feels a little bit bigger. So maybe like massive castles that are just huge won't be able to do much, but it feels like it wouldn't be too hard for most castles to deal with maneuvering this space here, and just being able to push onto the Gnarl Root. It does feel like maybe because the Heartwood's going to be worth more at the end, maybe actually controlling the Gnarl Root and the Heartwood is the prime strategy, because then you don't have to flip and try to take the Heartwood in the end. And since during that first battle round there's no objective scoring anyways, people may choose to just set up that first battle round, either try to engage, try to pin their opponents and just take them out, just table them right there, or they're going to try and set up onto the Gnarl Root objective and then extend onto the Heartwood and just have all this. This is not a lot of space to control, and there's so much space to maneuver around and stuff like that. As Sylvaneth, it seems like we could be a little bit more ready to adapt to that, dropping Awakened Wildwoods to either side, and then switching which side we're going after depending on the opponent's strategy and being able to play around that. So yeah, pretty crazy map, and I'm going to be interested in seeing how the meta for this map in particular plays out. The underdog bonus, it could be pretty impactful. This is sort of like a there's like spells that are, you know, bad spells, but there are spells that are like this. But you can pick an objective, and then for all the units that are contesting that objective, you roll a d3, and on a 2-up they take that much mortal damage. If you choose the Heartwood objective, you roll a d6 instead. So this could make it so that actually maybe those castle armies don't want to be piling their entire army onto the Heartwood objective and then taking d6 for each unit that's there. Maybe they do want to control the Heartwood and control the Gnarl Root and just be getting 8 points for 4 rounds, and then, you know, maybe on the last round go ahead and take the Heartwood objective off of you. Maybe try to table you, stuff like that. So that does put a little bit of kink into the plan, or a wrench in a spanner in the gears for trying to I'm sorry, I just amused myself trying to take the Gnarl Root and the Heartwood. For Sylvaneth, you know, you could tow a tree revenant on there and then back it off immediately, and maybe they take 1 round of d6 damage, but yeah, not such a big deal. Moving on to 2-2. It's a little bit out of order on my PDF here. This is the life roots, and so each player gets 1 life root point for each terrain feature that they're controlling, and you score victory points with 5 points for holding 1 objective, 3 points for holding both objectives, and there's only 2. You read that right. And then 2 points for having more life root points than your opponent. Kind of an interesting twist on the way battle plans can work, but nothing really too crazy. One thing as Sylvaneth is that we only have to have our terrain feature, our Awakened Wildwood, an inch away from the other terrain features. So you could theoretically like drop one piece of Awakened Wildwood terrain in here 3 times, and then you could use like a unit of dryads in a circle to hold 5 pieces of terrain and then like all but guarantee that you are going to win the life root battle. And actually doing that wouldn't be too bad of a strategy. You'd be down 1 point per round, so a total of 5 points if you're able to pull that off. Holding your objective and then holding these terrain pieces, and just dominating on life root points. You'd be down by 5 points over the course of the game, so it would come down to you'd have to make up that 5 points in primaries. So kind of an interesting look to that. So this one, it does seem like, let me see. Yeah, it does seem like maybe not, you shouldn't rely on necessarily the life root points, but that could be a kind of insurance policy to make sure that you're not falling too far behind. Because if you can't capture both objectives, actually, now that I think about it, what I was saying earlier was way off on the points. I was assuming your opponent was getting 8 points somehow, but they'd have to have both of the objectives. So you would be getting 7 points, and they would only be getting 5 points per round. So you'd be up 10 points by the end of the battle if you could pull that off. That's what it is. It's a double-edged sword, though, because the opponent could sweep in and take your 3 Awakened Wildwoods and 2 Obscuring Terrains right off of you, and just occupy that area, and it would backfire on you for sure. Maybe put it in this corner and just tag it with the Place of Power and to get 4 life root points that way. The battle may end up being over these 2 little obscuring terrain features instead of over the objectives. But now that I'm talking about that, when you're contesting an objective, I think you can only grab one of them. And then the objectives are sticky, so if you hold an objective, you continue to hold it even if your units walk off of it. But I don't think that's true for terrain. So I think I'm probably going to need a rules check on this one. I don't think you could do that trick with just 1 unit of dryads. I think you would need 1 unit of dryads for each terrain feature, which would be untenable. That would be disrespectful to your list building and awful. So maybe that's not the best strategy. So actually this is one where it does maybe work with MSU, where you would need 1 to hold each terrain feature, and then by just holding more than your opponent, you can pull ahead by 2 points every round. There's also the possibility a castle may be able to just steamroll through here and capture your objective as well. But in that case, they'd have to leave something behind to be able to defend their Heartwood, and a quick army may be able to swing around and take that off of them. So I lean towards this being a castle favoring map, but I'm not sure. It seems like there could probably be counterplay for mobile as well. It's one of those things where it's hard to, and this is going to apply to my analysis for all the battle plans. It's going to be hard to have perfect understanding of how the game plays out when you've never played on this map before. And we're going to get some clarity here eventually, but this is just sort of my first impressions on that. The underdog ability is pretty good. It's pretty good. Yeah, so it can let you bring back one model to one unit. That's impactful for us, for Sylvaneth, having elite units like the Kurnoth Hunters or the Cavalry. It's bad for our monsters. If you're going full monster mash, you don't bring any Kurnoth Hunters or anything. It's going to be worse. It's going to be completely worthless, actually. But on the other hand, too, it's not. I mean, a single Kurnoth Hunter is pretty good if you can get one every battle round. I mean, for 4 battle rounds, that adds up to a lot of value over the course of the game. I'm not sure how realistic that is, where you're going to be losing and gaining back Kurnoth Hunters the whole battle type of thing. But yeah, it could be pretty good for us. Just more something to be aware of, where maybe once or twice, if you are the underdog, once or twice you may be able to gain this advantage. You want to be holding the terrain features anyways, so you do want to be within 1 inch. I mean, you have to be within 3 inches, but just be aware of it with your positioning, especially for Kurnoth Hunters, to position them to be on the terrain features. And now that I think about it too, it does kind of favor a more defensive, like a Kurnoth Hunters with scythes, where you want to be stacked onto that terrain feature and then have your opponent charge into you. So that could be an option. And then, you lose some and you can bring them back to life even if you're in combat. It's very nice. We got to go back to 2-3. So the scoring on this is 5 points for holding 1, 3 points for holding 2 or more, and then 2 points for holding the Oakenbrow, Gnarlroot, and Heartwood objective, at least one of each. So this is another 5 objective map, Heartwood right in the center, and you're definitely going to be fighting over that Heartwood objective to get those extra 2 points per round. You already have one of each of the Gnarlroot and the Oakenbrow in your home territory, so the action probably is going to be right there on that Heartwood. This one, I feel like, I can very confidently say favors a castle. You're mostly focusing on just one spot. It's very open, and even the other 2 objectives aren't super far away to where your opponent's going to be able to easily take them off of you. So you could try, if you are a more mobile army against a castle army, you could try to take those one of those 2 objectives off of them. With Sylvaneth, we have those mobility tricks, the teleportation and things like that, to where we can be kind of dancing around the board maybe. I just don't think that'll be super effective, but it may help you to be able to stall out, stop your opponent from getting those extra 2 points every round. And if you can delay your opponent from getting those 2 points, then that's pretty good. Otherwise, you do want to be fighting over the Heartwood if you feel like you can contest it from your opponent. So yeah, this one may come down to tactics, maybe another battle plan where tactics are going to be a pretty big factor, because it's going to be pretty reliable to be able to get 8 points per turn. And I think it's going to come down to either trying to capture the Heartwood to get the extra 2 points, or denying your opponent those extra 2 points and trying to battle them on tactics overall. There's quite a bit of obscuring, and these are pretty close to the objective, so you could possibly park some Kurnoth Hunters in the obscuring and shoot away from there. So that reduced range may not matter as much. Yeah, and then for the underdog, you pick an objective and you heal 3 for all units that are contesting that objective. This is probably one of the weakest ones. You get to pick, but other than that, it is symmetrical, and it's just healing. So it's bad for armies that have a bunch of 1 and 2 wound or health units. For us, it's a little bit better, where we've got monsters and we've got kurnoth hunters and stuff that have a high health pool, but still it does seem like it's one of the weaker ones. Moving on to 2-4, life cycle. Scoring is 2 points for one objective, or sorry, 4 points for one objective, 2 points for more objectives than your opponent, 4 points for both Oakenbrow and Gnarlroot for the first battle round only, and then 2 points for the primary objective and 1 point for the secondary objective. Now, we have to get right into the underdog here because you're wondering what's the primary and secondary. Underdog is only at the start of the second battle round. You get life cycle, and if there's no underdog, you have to roll off for it because you need the life cycle to start. Whoever wins the roll-off or is the underdog picks the Oakenbrow or the Gnarlroot objective to be the primary, and then the adjacent objectives are the secondary objectives. So if it's the Oakenbrow, then it'll be, well, actually it doesn't matter which which one you pick. If you pick Oakenbrow, then Gnarlroot is not a secondary objective, and if you pick Gnarlroot, then Oakenbrow is not a secondary objective. But then it goes clockwise around the board each round. So in round 2 it'll be Oakenbrow, round 3 it'll be Winterleaf, round 4 it'll be Gnarlroot, and then round 5 it'll be Heartwood. This seems like it's pretty clear that if you're the underdog, you want to pick, and say you're the defender, you want to pick the Gnarlroot because that'll put the primary on your home objective, which by this third round of the game, your opponent probably has not captured it off of you. And so you're able to maximize your scoring then. And then it doesn't matter if your opponent is the underdog because they don't get any kind of benefit from that after round 2. And then in round 4, in round 4, it goes to the Oakenbrow, and there's still a chance that you could hold it. And by that point, maybe you've done enough damage to your opponent that you can actually go in and take their Winterleaf objective, and then you can dominate on scoring. If you look at it the other way, if the opponent gets to choose, or if you for some reason choose to do the Oakenbrow objective first, maybe you're holding the Oakenbrow objective currently, you can get the primary at that point, but in round 3, it's going to go to your opponent's home objective, and it's going to be quite a bit harder for you to take that off of them. So I think this does come down to being the underdog going into round 2 is probably going to be the dominant strategy because you can dictate the pace of the game or the flow of the game after that. That seems to me, that's what strikes me first, is that it'll give you a pretty strong advantage. And then as far as like a castle army doing well versus a more mobile army, it does seem like something that can either spread out like a monster mash list or something that's more mobile that can chase around the primary objective is going to be the better play here. These are fairly close together, and this internal area, this box of no man's land, is fairly open. I can see even with a small place of power here, with an obstacle here, I can see these being kind of choke points, and making it a bit harder to move around for like a castle, a large group of units. So that tends to lean towards, plus with the objectives moving, essentially the primary objective moving, that tends to lean me towards saying that a more castle-y, slow kind of an army is not going to perform as well here. 2-5 here is going to be Creeping Corruption, 5 points for one objective, 3 points for holding 2 or more, and then 2 points for more than your opponent. Back to the classic traditional scoring here. It's an even number of objectives, which means it's going to be really easy to do hold 1 and hold 2, but holding more is going to be pretty difficult. But even if your opponent does hold more, it should be, relatively easy to hold 2. They're also quite spread out across a rather large area, although the map is fairly open if we consider the obscuring terrain not to be too difficult to move through. So open but spread out. I think, being able to cap one of your opponent's objectives and react to their movement, if they push on your west side and being able to move on the east side, or if they push on the middle and being able to take the flanks, this could be the advantage for the mobile army to be able to react. But because it is kind of difficult to be able to take an objective off of your opponent, and if you do, then maybe they would also take one off of you, where you're vulnerable. It could be a bit of back and forth, tit for tat type of a thing, and come down to the battle tactics in this map. I do see that opportunity for this map as well. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. It's going to come down to how you play and reacting to how your opponent plays. For the underdog ability, you get to choose to use this once per battle round. At the start of the battle round, pick an objective you control and one other objective, whether you control it or not. You draw a line between the two, and then you can choose to either do, let's say, do D3 damage to every unit that's crossing that line, or to add one to casting rolls, chanting rolls, and banishment rolls for every unit across that line. So if you've got a lockdown on your backline, your home objectives, then you could give yourself the bonus to casting. We do have a lot of casting, so this could be pretty good for us. Otherwise, you can use it as like a laser beam to zap your opponent, especially something like taking one of their objectives. Then you can zap it across the map to one of your objectives or across their line if they're hanging back, that type of a thing. Yeah, so pretty good. D3 is pretty good. It's better than roll a D3 and then do damage on a 2-up. But yeah, D3, nothing too crazy, but it could help you get back into the game that way. And depending on what spells you have, what wizards you brought and spells you have available, the +1 to casting could be pretty good as well. But yeah, that was a pretty straightforward one. And then finally, 2-6, we're on Grasp of Thorns. Victory points is 5 for holding 1, 3 for holding 2 or more, and then 2 for holding more than your opponent. The classic, the traditional. We've only got 4 objectives here, and we've got 2 obstacles right in the middle here. And this one, I would imagine, would be a little bit more of a restrictive kind of a map, at least in the center here. These the flanks are quite a bit open and a little bit easier to go through. But the middle is going to be quite a bit of a castle, or sorry, quite a bit of a choke point. And if you do have a tar pit and you're able to, if dryads end up being good, maybe you can do a Awakened Wildwood with 20 dryads right in the middle there. You might be able to hold that pass like the Spartans, and just tar pit their whole army and be able to just run amok on them. So again, with, and I didn't mention this too many times. Well, maybe you think it was too many times. I didn't analyze it every single time, but this is another one where maybe the dual castle formation works, or splitting your army in half. There could be some advantage to having an army that is adaptable to be able to be 1 giant castle or 2 castles or even 3, functioning as, thinking of them as 2 different units, 3 different units, and 1 different unit, and being able to still be cohesive that way. But maybe I'll talk about that more in a little bit right when we're done with this. The underdog ability is that you can opt to use this ability. You don't have to, but you can pick an objective to be grasping, and then you roll a dice for each unit that is contesting that objective, and then on a 3-up, every model in the unit that's within the control zone is entangled for the rest of the round, and entangled models have to stay within the control zone of the grasping objective. So what that means is only the models that are on the objective are grasped. They're grasped. But the other units obviously can't, or the other models in the unit cannot leave. Otherwise, they would be out of coherency, and then one of the halves of the unit would be destroyed. They'd be slain. They'd run away from the battle for lack of coherency. So this is a weird one, mostly because restricting someone's movement is very powerful. but it is on a 3-up, but you do roll for each unit. But the thing is, if you want to lock them on their own objective, that would mean they have to be back on their own objective. So it's going to be interesting situations where this is useful, because it may actually be the situation where they push forward and they take one of your objectives, and then you go ahead and lock them down on your objective, and then you get around or teleport or something to take their home objectives while they're stuck on your objective. And maybe you're fighting on your other objective and protecting that one. So kind of weird, but yeah, it definitely does feel like mobility is going to be rewarded here as well, because yeah, you're going to have to make it across the map, and these are pretty spread out, these 4 objectives. So being able to react to your opponent is going to be valuable. So kind of weird. Yeah, the relevance is going to vary. It's going to be kind of weird situations where it is relevant. So my closing thoughts on the overview of these battle plans is that, like I was saying, I wonder if being able to adapt is going to be best. And in those maps and in those situations where it pays off to castle, or yeah, and you're better at castling than your opponent, then being able to assemble that castle, defense up, control that space, and lock them out is going to be good. But if you're coming up against an opponent that is better at castling than you, or you're on a map where castling is not favored, and there's quite a lot of maps where mobility is rewarded, being able to adapt and split up your units, split into 2 or 3 groups, or be able to move independently and get around the map, reacting to your opponent, being able to be adaptable that way as Sylvaneth may be a really good strategy. And the interesting thing is, I wonder if that alarielle belthanos list can do that. Now, the big question at that point is the kurnoth hunters with scythes or with bows. They've got like a 5-inch movement, if I'm not mistaken, and which is not very fast. But maybe teleportation can help us to make up for that. Alarielle and belthanos themselves are very fast, and if they're dealing with faster, more chaffy style of enemy units, alarielle and belthanos can bully those kinds of units. Belthanos, you do have to watch out for. You have to be a little bit more worried about him. But against sort of, dark oath type of things that are maybe giving up some durability and some damage in order to get that speed, belthanos could be a good option to deal with those and bully those things out. Yeah, so I think it is worth looking at the alarielle belthanos list and then maybe adapting it if we're finding that it doesn't work very well. I think it's worth trying out the kurnoth hunters with great bows in that list as well, and seeing if they really do just kind of get shut down by so much obscuring being in the game. And yeah, making it so they can't shoot. Then being able to teleport around and shoot still does give them an advantage, though, if we're looking at being mobile and reacting and getting them out of trouble and getting them to a position to capture objectives that your opponent left vulnerable. That teleportation ability is good, plus being able to reliably deal damage with their shooting, as opposed to the scythes, which have to make a 9-inch charge in order to be able to do that damage, which is a lot less reliable. So sort of interesting thing to think about with that list in particular. Thinking about cavalry, they did improve Revenant Seekers. They are quite a bit stronger. I like them, which means they're probably going to be bad. It makes me wonder if they are worth looking at. They can sort of operate more independently. There are rumors that there are going to be additional rules that are not in the GHB that would restrict things. One I'm thinking of that I heard someone say, I have no inside information. As far as I know, this is just a rumor and not any inside information. But there is a rumor that cavalry with 5 health or more are not going to be allowed to be reinforced, which would make Revenant Seekers a lot worse. Not terrible necessarily. Maybe these battle plans are spread out enough and the mobility is rewarded enough, and maybe their damage got improved enough that And maybe the opponents are not running tanky units enough that non-reinforced Revenant Seekers are strong enough. So we'll have to see. That is the kind of thing that I would expect to be in the General's Handbook. It's not in here, but it's possible that they put that in the Battle Scroll updates, and they may have like a big comprehensive Battle Scroll update when the GHB officially releases and becomes tournament legal, and that Battle Scroll update may address it. So don't go out and buy a bunch of boxes of Revenant Seekers because Gamma Fighter said that he likes Revenant Seekers. In fact, that's probably a good indication that you shouldn't bring them because I'd love to see them on the table, and so I'm probably not going to get my wish there. But something to consider trying out if you already have them or whatever. That's the thing too. This is the time to be able to experiment. No one really knows what's going to be good, and you can try some wacky off-the-wall stuff, and it may end up working. There's a lot of changes, and as we'll go over the battle tactics in the next video, because the battle tactics have changed very much as well. We're definitely not playing 4th edition the same way with this General's Handbook that we were with the previous General's Handbook. So I think there's opportunities for some crazy experimentation. Another note is that the maximum number of objectives in this battle plan, in this GHB, is 6. So the most objectives that you need to score the more than your opponent thing is 4 objectives. So it's possible that one of those objectives will be like your home objective, and then you really only need 3 strong units to be able to capture contested objectives, kind of a thing. If you kind of get what I'm saying with one of them, one objective may be sort of easier to hold with tree revenants or something like that. That's cheap, and then there may actually really only be battle over a maximum of 3 objectives at a time. In which case, people saying that this is going to be an MSU GHB, minimum sized units, that maybe not going to be as relevant as people are expecting, because you can fit 3 big strong units in a list, and you might not need more than that. Maybe just some utility type of units, some tech pieces that can hold those objectives pretty well as well. And I think, just from my first impressions here, my sort of final thoughts is that the armies that are going to do really well are those that have 2 to 3 really strong and really fast units. And that, instantly makes me think of Slaves to Darkness, because that's my second favorite army. But, and they could easily dominate with like a Vanguard, reinforced Vanguard, reinforced Chaos Knights, and I don't know, something else. Bellicor. And honestly, that might be almost 2,000 points right there, so they wouldn't be able to do much more than that. But it strikes me that could possibly dominate because they're just so fast, they're so durable, they're so damaging that the whole thing about like being adaptable and being mobile doesn't really matter. They can do that. They can be fast, they can get in there, they can destroy your guys, and they can survive too if they need to, survive your clapback, all this kind of stuff, which does kind of lend credence to that idea that there's a rumor that the Vanguard and the Knights would be targeted by that nerf to 5 health cavalry units not being able to be reinforced. So could be the case. My first glance is that maybe Slaves of Darkness is going to be really strong with a cavalry list here. So but yeah, those are my thoughts, guys. Let me know what you think down below, how you're approaching these battle plans, if this gave you any more insight and just sort of being able to process and understand how these battle plans are going to play out in the future. And let me know how you're adapting your armies and what you're building up and painting up to be able to go for this in the comment section down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Really appreciate all of you guys. Just being a small little community that loves Sylvaneth, loves Age of Sigmar, and loves playing this game and talking about it together. Always appreciate your guys' insights and appreciate when you guys can like and subscribe on these videos. But that's it for me, and I'll just see you in the next one.